My recommendation would be to always grow tomatoes in a greenhouse if you possibly can, or a conservatory or a polythene tunnel. You've got more control of temperature, of humidity, and you're more likely to grow a successful crop year on year compared with the outside vagaries of the weather. And I would be looking, of course, for a greenhouse or a polythene tunnel that's getting plenty of sunshine. The more light there is, the better it is for tomatoes, and the earlier we plant tomatoes, the more sunny the conditions are, the more likely we are to get the fruits to set on the trusses and to get good development of the leaf and the stem structures. Well, if you're going to grow in the garden, then what it means is you've got to grow the plants beforehand in greenhouses to keep the frost off them. And the earliest you can contemplate planting out is late May, certainly not before the 21st of May. And after that date, we don't usually get frost. And so it would be safe to plant out, I would say, late May-ish. And of course, remember that if you're growing tomatoes outside, then you're subject to the vagaries of the weather. And if it's cold, the tomatoes don't like it. If it sunshines, they love it. And of course, the success will depend upon the kind of summer that you get. So it's a little bit hit and miss, I'm afraid, outside. Well, the usual thing is to plant tomatoes in the soil. Now, obviously outside, that's the most usual medium for growing in. And in a greenhouse, if you've got a border soil, then you can grow tomatoes in the border soil. But what I must stress is that after about 3 years of growing in the soil, you'll start to pick up pests and diseases. And you need to either change your soil or sterilise it in some way. But the best thing is to get them out of the soil and grow them in grow bags or containers, 10-inch pots. Something that's not in the soil. You must isolate from the soil and cut off the pest and disease infection. For greenhouse grown tomatoes, we're talking about a night temperature no less than 14 degrees C or 58 degrees Fahrenheit, and a maximum day temperature when the sun's out of 21 degrees centigrade or 70 Fahrenheit. And once you get to that higher temperature, you've got to ventilate to try and keep the temperature down to the 21 degrees C. Truss is a kind of a bunch of fruits, if you like, and we'd normally expect a minimum of 6 trusses, maybe going up as many as 7 or 8 trusses, but it all depends on when you plant and how early you can plant the crop. If it's a cold crop of tomatoes you're growing and not planting before mid or late April, then I'd only gamble on 6 or 7 trusses. But if you can give some heat and you can plant your tomatoes earlier, say the beginning of March, and take them on well into late autumn, getting into December, then you may well get 8 or 9 trusses. It all depends on the conditions that you give them and how early you can plant, the length of the growing season. Well, with tomato varieties, the choice is really a personal one, but let me just set the scene. You've got a choice of cherry tomatoes, the normal size of tomatoes which you expect to find. We've got the great big beefsteaks. We've got plum-shaped tomatoes. We've got all colours, from red to yellow to black to even stripy tomatoes. It's a matter of what appeals to you and what you want to grow. But can I just say that if you grow the ordinary size of tomato, varieties like Shirley and Alicante and Moneymaker, they are great, but you're unlikely to get them cropping before late July. Depends on the weather. But you'll always get cherry tomatoes cropping about 3 weeks earlier. So if you really want to grow the bigger tomatoes, I would suggest putting in a few cherry tomatoes, because always they're going to give you a little bit of early fruit to lead up to the normal season of cropping. Once you've made the choice, then you will need to sow the seeds in small seed trays or pots. And of course, you can be sowing the seeds as early as mid-February to allow about 8 weeks to get a decent plant for planting out in middle of April onwards. But of course, you can sow throughout the whole of March and into early April, really. The option, of course, to sowing seed is to buying young plants, and a brilliant innovation in recent years are the small plug trays with little tiny plants in, and the plugs are about the size of my thumb. Seed sown in there, plant grows to about 3 inches tall, and you buy them as little 6-packs like that. Then all you need to do then is to take the plant out with its little root ball of compost and then place it into a 3-inch pot and then grow it on. It's quite simple really. Alternatively, you can buy in semi-grown tomato plants already in 3-inch pots and probably about 6, 8 or 9 inches tall. Now of course that cuts out a lot of the preparatory work in seed sowing and growing on, and so you're part way there, in which case then you can delay any work in producing plants until you buy in your semi-grown plants from mid-April onwards. Well, if you're going to plant tomatoes out either in the soil or in pots, then you need to think about the rows being possibly 18 inches apart, and within the rows the spacing is usually about 16 inches. Now you can flex that a little bit to suit your greenhouse and how many tomatoes you want to get in. If it's a well-lit greenhouse getting sun all day, then you can afford to have them a little bit closer. But if light is a little bit sparse and not as good as it should be, then I'd give them more space. So go for 18 inches between the rows and 18 inches between the plants. But of course, usually the closer you put them, you tend to get more yield coming from that. But it isn't a be-all and end-all. You must have good light if you're going to close them up. I think with tomatoes, they need to be supported, and we tend to grow them as a cordon where we just grow one shoot up a cane. The alternative is to use polypropylene twine and tie that on a high wire, take it down to the base of plant and either put it under the plant when you plant it or wrap it loosely around the base of the plant. And as the plant grows, then you just wrap the plant and the string around each other. They'll love each other and grow together, and you don't need the canes to support the plants. Oh, grow bags have been used for many, many years and is a very good way of growing tomatoes. Now, you can grow those on the soil bed, but I'd always advise putting a polythene sheet down over a soil bed. And if you've got concrete or paving slabs, then the poly bags can go straight onto the concrete surface. And usually they accommodate a minimum of 2 plants and usually 3. Now, if you've got a vigorous variety and you're wanting to grow larger fruits, then maybe you want to put 2 plants in, one at either end. But if you're not too fussy on size, then you might squeeze the extra one in the middle and go for slightly smaller fruits but higher yield.